Hello, this is the Unit 6 Industrial Revolution tutorial lesson. We're going to cover all of the information that was covered in Unit 6 to help you prepare for your retest. We're going to review first the economic effects of the War of 1812. As you can see on the screen, we see multiple effects here, but the big one that we're going to focus on is how U.S. manufacturing grew. The War of 1812 is going to decrease the level of imported goods from Britain because we're at war with them, and so Americans cannot import British goods as easily as they could before. This is going to cause U.S. manufacturing to grow. Americans are forced to build their own factories and produce their own goods, and so we're going to see economic growth and especially manufacturing growth. The next thing that we'll review is the economic factors that brought about rapid industrialization and urbanization. If you remember from our lesson, industrialization, the root of that word is industry, and this would be the growth of businesses or factories in particular here. With urbanization, this will be the growth of urban areas or the growth of cities, and we can see images of both of those here on the screen. Our economic causes of industrialization, urbanization, we have a few different ones. We covered the free enterprise system. This is when individuals enjoy the freedom of making their own economic decisions. And so people can use their private property. They're hoping to make a profit. They're allowed to compete in a free market. And this is going to allow for industrial growth to occur. Also, we see improved transportation. So as we get innovations in locomotives and shipping, we also get economic growth because there's ways to ship those goods across the country and throughout the world. There are new inventions and innovations that will be developed during this time. Economic opportunities and jobs in cities will cause the growth of cities themselves or urbanization, so people are attracted to those areas. And we also have a growing population from migration from rural areas and also immigration, mostly from Germany and Ireland and China, where these immigrant groups are going to help with the low-cost labor for factory work and provide a steady supply of employees to help produce goods. Let's review next how technological innovations brought about economic growth, such as the factory system and construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. With the factory system, we see the faster production of goods. With the Transcontinental Railroad, we see the faster transportation of goods. Both of these are going to help spur economic growth, and these innovations in the way that goods are produced and the way that they're transported are going to be more expedient, faster, and also allow for those goods to be cheaper. Technological innovations that change the way goods were manufactured and distributed nationally and internationally. We've been talking about this as well. One of our big innovations that we spoke about was the interchangeable parts, being able to have multiple of the same pieces to put together to make the same good. This allows for mass production of goods, also cheaper prices because you're not spending as much time producing those goods. And this is going to lead to a difference or a divide between factory labor, those that can do very basic manual actions like interchangeable parts, versus skilled labor, where someone's building something from scratch using a skill or an art skill that they've acquired over time, like with artisans and craftspeople. Factory labor is going to allow for cheaper prices, and factory labor is going to allow for mass production of goods. Steam power with boats and locomotives, as we see on the screen. This is also going to allow for faster shipping of goods, and we're going to see cheaper prices out of this as well. You're not having to pay as much money to ship those goods to market, and therefore the cost of the good decreases. We have new forms of transportation, which is also going to help with nationwide economic growth. Let's next review how physical characteristics of the environment influence population distribution. We have settlement patterns and economic activities in the United States. Our first image to the left here is of the Lowell Mill, one of the first mills that's built, a factory. We can see that this mill is sitting on a river. It says that the Lowell Mills were a series of mills and factories that were built along the Merrimack River by the Boston Manufacturing Company. These mills were used to process textiles and spinning and weaving of cloth under one roof. It allowed for mass production of quality cloth. This also allowed Americans to stop importing textiles from Britain and produce their own. Urbanization is another way that ties into our population distribution. So we have people that are shifting from rural areas, or what we consider to be country life, into city life. And we can see an image to the right here of the growth of a city. Factories are going to bring people into those cities looking for work. We also have cities grow that are near energy sources like coal and water with the rivers for the factories. And cities are going to double or even triple sometimes in size. And this is for because of a few different reasons. We have migration to factories and also immigration as a form of labor for those factories as well. Let's also review the economic differences among different regions of the United States. We learned about the Northeast, identified in blue here on the screen and labeled Northeast. This section has more cities, more factories and manufacturing, and more immigrants in those cities because of the draw of factories. In the South, the yellow section on the map, this is very different from the Northeast. They're still relying on a plantation system and using enslaved labor. They're going to provide crops, especially cotton, to the northeastern factories for textile mills, and they're still producing cash crops for exporting across the world as well. So mostly agrarian in the South. Not a lot of factories, not a lot of cities, and not very large populations. And in the Midwest, this is our new section in green, which we're referring to as the Midwest. This is going to be an area of the country that's mostly based around farming. They also have a lot of really good river access to the Great Lakes. And so when we talk about canals and shipping and using steamboats, the Midwest is going to benefit from that especially. There's lots of new land and territory to claim in the Midwest. So we have more lower class, also farmers, small family crafts, artisan people, and farmers that are going to be around the Midwest. And the river and lake access is also going to be a draw for some factories in that region. All right, this is the one that's out of the ordinary for the rest of our unit. Let's review the origin of judicial review. We did look at this political cartoon in class. How did they expect us to stop them is the caption, and we can see this football player right here is the one that's speaking. His mouth is open. So we assume that he's saying, how did they expect us to stop them? This side of the line, they have 4 players, and this would be the Executive Eagles. And on the other side of the line, we have 6 players, and they're the legislative lines. And so we know just about government in general that the legislature or Congress has more members, and the executive branch, where the president and vice president work, has less members. And we can also use some details from their jerseys, like the president's power to pardon and also the president's power to veto bills. We can identify the legislative powers here. They can impeach officials. They can spend money. Congress is the only government entity that's allowed to write a budget and spend money, tax money, through the government. And then off to the backside, we see the judicial referees in the background. And we see judicial. We know that this is the Supreme Court. And they're holding in their hands a booklet or a piece of paper that says U.S. Constitution. Let's look at our definition of judicial review, and then we'll apply that knowledge to the cartoon. It says here that judicial review is the power of courts to determine the validity or if acts of the legislature are legal. So with judicial review, what we're talking about is the Supreme Court having the final decision on if laws passed and signed by the legislative and the executive, if those laws are then legal. So if we take our understanding of judicial review, the Supreme Court's power to declare laws unconstitutional, we can now look at our cartoon and see that we have the executive and the legislative lined up against each other in a football game. And they all have their own special powers. But over here in the back, we have the referees. And we think about a football game or any kind of sports game in general. The referees act as the people that will enforce the law. And we can see here that in their hands, they're holding the US Constitution. So I can infer based on this cartoon that the executive and the legislative will be battling against each other, writing a law, or they both approve a law. But ultimately, the judicial branch or the Supreme Court will be the one that will determine if that law or if that action is legal. Either it be an executive order or if it's an act of Congress. The Supreme Court is going to have the final authority on saying if a law or an action of government is constitutional, if it's legal or within the bounds of the Constitution. All right, and lastly, let's review the racial, ethnic, and religious groups that settled in the U.S. and explain their reasons for immigration and their contributions. Our first group that we looked at were the Chinese. Chinese immigration happens because they're seeking economic opportunity. We mostly have a lot of single male Chinese immigrants that are coming into the United States, and they're going to be working mainly on building the Transcontinental Railroad. That is their major contribution to the U.S. story. We also see Chinese families, like the one pictured down here at the bottom, that come and stay in the United States, engage in what we refer to as service industries. So as laundries, daycares, restaurants, a lot of services that they would provide to people in society. So we get infrastructure, the Transcontinental Railroad being built by Chinese immigrants, and also service industries being developed and run by these families that are immigrating into the country. Our second group were the Germans. You can see some images here of German immigrants. German immigrants come seeking economic opportunities, so they're wanting to change their economic status or make more money. And they also are seeking political freedom. And so we have the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and this has now become a draw for a lot of people across the world, and especially for Germans because the country and the region of Europe at this time is going through a lot of political upheaval. And so they're trying to escape that and find a safe place. Their contribution to American society is very large. German immigrants settle mostly in the Midwest and then also in Texas. They're going to contribute to public education, really pushing for universal education for all people. Kindergartens, the word kindergarten is German, and this is kind of that first step towards schooling young children. A lot of holiday traditions in the United States, like the Christmas tree, the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, and even the weekend, as we know it, Saturday and Sunday, are influences from the German immigrants during this time. And our last group were the Irish. The Irish here, they're fleeing a potato famine back in Ireland. This is when their potato crops failed, which potatoes typically were the staple crop of the lower class. We can see here at the bottom a political cartoon from 1847 published in the London News, and it's a drawing here that says a starving boy and girl in Cork hoping to find a potato. And so we see this has big negative consequences on the Irish population, and many of them come to America seeking a safe place to live and also food sources and work and income, anything to escape the potato famine in their homeland. Many are going to help and contribute by working to build the Erie Canal, digging the Erie Canal, and also building the Transcontinental Railroad. They're dispersed and they settle in many various places across the country as those railroads are built out and more canals are added. Irish population coming because of a potato famine and mostly contributing through infrastructure like the Erie Canal and the Transcontinental Railroad. You might also go back and review your innovations like the telegraph, the cotton gin, and other basic inventions that we talked about. These are your steps for the tutorial process. We watched the review video. We covered all the important information you need to know. We also have some review questions we need you to answer that will be on the same Canvas page, and then your retest will be available for you to help improve your grade. I hope this tutorial video has helped, and we'll see you next time.